Hello, rock and roll rebels, and welcome to another episode of Ramble On with Rosie. I apologize for not having any content last week. I was not at my best. It's not a great time of year for some of us souls out here, but I am continuing on, and in the spirit of the day, it being Valentines, I am going to spotlight some great rock and roll romances. Specifically ones between two musicians. So things like Alice and Cheryl Cooper, and Susan and Duff McKagan, and Joe and Billy Perry are not going to make the list because only one of those parties involved is a musician of, like professional standing. For all I know, the women in those families may play guitar, but they're not out there touring like their husbands do. So these are going to be mutually musical couples to spread some love in the air, whether it's to encourage, people already in a relationship to, keep going and that it can last a lifetime, or let us poor single souls know that, hey, this does exist out there and maybe we'll find it one day. So, consider this your romantic encouragement for the Valentine's Day this year. So, starting off with the couple of all musical couples, Johnny and June. Now, I realize some people may be like, but they're not really rock and roll. Oh ho, that is what you think. Obviously, Johnny Cash has some rock and roll cred already, being a rockabilly artist and having had a massive influence through his playing on rock and roll, and also his very rock and roll attitude of bridging the gap between African American culture and, white culture and the white radio and black radio crossover, which, a lot of that came out of Sun Studios, which is where Johnny Cash came out of. Elvis did too, and they were all white artists who were drawing off of black music and making it accessible to, white radio, which wasn't going to play the black artists. And eventually, 10 years later, or maybe it was longer than that. I wasn't alive back then. They started actually playing. They desegregated radio basically, which was about time because let's be real, rock and roll would not exist without black influence. Straight up facts. It came out of the blues, and it came out of, jazz and gospel and things like that. But back to Johnny Cash, the man in black, who incidentally, when asked why he wore black, explained it was because, it was his way of representing the downtrodden. So, yay for repping equality. Good on Johnny. And equality in music. But that's not where it ends. The influence of the Carter family cannot be underestimated because June's mother invented a guitar style, or at the very least was the first known person to, do it and, other people see it. So, she may have gotten it from somebody else, but Mabel Carter invented what was called the Carter Scratch, which was, used by rock artists and folk artists and, all over. Once this style was invented, other people borrowed and copied it. So that's a pretty hefty influence. In fact, when you think about it, the Carter family was one of the first country acts to be recorded. They had a recording happen in 1927 when it was June's grandparents heading the band. And after that, they kept, generations of the family kept making music. So in a way, June was sort of like a country music princess. Meanwhile, Johnny, the year before they got married at least, was at the rope's end of his career. He had kind of ruined it all by, taking too many drugs and having to cancel gigs, and was at such a low point that he had actually crawled into a cave to commit suicide, essentially. Slowly, just starved to death in a cave, got lost. His flashlight ran out of battery, and he was just going to lay there. And then he sort of found God and had a revelation of oh, well, I don't think God's done with me, and so I need to find a way out, and crawled back out of the cave, which is it was 3 hours of walking in with a flashlight, so I don't know how long it took him to crawl out without a flashlight. the fact he got out of there without falling off a cliff was kind of a miracle in of itself. And when he finally got out of the cave, who else would be waiting for him but his mother and Miss June Carter, who he married the next year. So the fact that, the two most important women of his life were waiting for him after one of the biggest turnarounds anybody can have in their life, was pretty, impressive and sweet. And then they stayed together ever after that. So they got married in 1968. They had sort of been seeing each other before that, even though they were both already married. The strange tangled webs that messy humans weave, but they made it work once they got married and stayed married until their deaths. June died in early 2003, and then like 4 months later, Johnny died. So they were very closely linked. In fact, when they asked Johnny for his description of paradise, he simply said, "This morning, with her, having coffee." The simple things in life that make, the world go round, and just enjoying your partner's company, which is really wholesome to hear that people actually do. So, moving on from that, we have another romance with tangled beginnings. So, this one between the boss and his red-headed woman, because Bruce hired Patti Scialfa to join the E Street Band for the Born in the USA tour. And in spite of the sexual tension between them in every photograph you see from that tour, Bruce went and found somebody else and married her, married Julianne Phillips to be specific, kind of in the middle of the Born in the USA tour. So it's like, okay, must have misread some cues there or something. Everybody else is like, he's not dating our bandmate? But just wait. So after, I think only about a year or two of being married to Julianne, he sort of realized that, between his busy career and her busy career, and him also not having the maturity to share his mental health struggles with his spouse, the gulf between them widened, and, so they were in the process of getting divorced and separating when he formally started the affair, which I guess it wouldn't really be an affair at that point because he was divorcing Julianne, with Patti Scialfa. And they have been together ever since, and they have 3 gorgeous kids. And also, if you haven't read Bruce Springsteen's autobiography, I highly recommend it just for the chapters about his relationship with Patti and their kids and all the stuff then. Like, they're so heartwarming to read and realistic and gritty, because he's sort of like, yeah, we had to learn that, at least he specifically had to learn that fighting isn't always a bad thing. Like, if you come out on the other side understanding your partner better, then, this is something that hadn't happened in his previous relationships, and finally, his feisty redhead was not about ready to take any BS off of BS or anybody else, and told him what she thought, and so they, may have yelled at each other, but they got past it and stayed together and are still together. And raise, like I mentioned earlier, they raised 3 kids, and not just anything. I mean, here they are. They're hugely famous people, especially Bruce, and she's in Bruce's band, so by association, she's kind of hugely famous too. And I don't know about y'all, but I think about celebrity children, and I usually don't have positive stories coming to mind. Meanwhile, Bruce and Patty's kids are in the news for things like starting a charity, or becoming a firefighter, or being in the freaking Olympics on the equestrian team. So yeah, they raised some really good kids, which I feel is something of a testament to the strength of their relationship, to raise as even-keeled children as they did, who aren't in the news for things like drug addiction and car wrecks and, nude photos or something. So, that being the case, Bruce and Patti are, not to be cliche, but relationship goals. In spite of the strange beginnings, still definitely relationship goals. So, moving on from one rock and roll power couple to another who had reverse beginnings, as in it was the lady who had the man join her band, and it was also the lady who was kind of married when she met this guy, but they got past that a little bit later. That would be the about damn time for her to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Pat Benatar, and her beloved husband, Neil Giraldo, who I can definitely understand why she fell for Neil. Like, the day that she met him, to the point that she met Neil, who she affectionately has dubbed Spider. If you read her autobiography, it's really cute when she talks about meeting him. But she ran home, or not ran home, but when she got home, called up her best friend. It was like, I've met the father of my children. And her best friend's like, you're trying to get divorced right now, Pat. Don't be a dumbass. She's like, no, you don't understand. I have met the father of my children. They have like 2 daughters together, so she wasn't wrong. You know, good insight on Pat's part, but she kind of had to get divorced in order, because the other people in her band had told Neil that, she was married. Neil was kind of in a relationship, and so she decided to clean things up on her end, got her divorce, and Neil began to suspect that his girlfriend was cheating on him, and Pat's over here trying to sound sympathetic while gleefully jumping up and down inside, as she, describes in her book. And then they went on, like, a date to the San Gennaro Festival in Little Italy. Neil Giraldo's Sicilian, for those of you who don't know. And shared their first kiss and have been together ever since. So it's, really sweet. Like, and also, I love the amount of respect that Neil has for his wife's career, because he specifically sort of like guardianed it where she would not have to sell herself as a sex object in order to be taken seriously as a musician, because obviously that's going to hurt your credibility, but record companies just want you to sell records. So obviously if you wear a skimpy little cat suit or something, that's going to sell more records if you're a girl. But Neil was like, no, she's not going to sing vapid pop songs and make herself an object. She's going to sing songs like Hell is for Children and wear, whatever she wants to. Because, I mean, she's plenty cute as is. She doesn't need to, dress in some really skanky outfit. She's pretty cute as is. So, like, Neil was not about ready to see his wife objectified, and I am here for that. I'm like, you go, Neil. You protect your boo. And so that is like another reason why Pat and Neil are goals, aside from the fact that they've been together, since like 1982 or something. They got together in the early 80s, and they're just really sweet. And like I said, she's really cute, and Neil's really attractive too. So like, they made really cute kids. They're really cute, and props to them for making it last. And extra props to Neil for making sure his wife didn't get, ramrodded by the record business. Now, for the ultimate drum roll, the rock and roll couple. Because you can't get any more rock and roll than the Beatles. And you can't get any more relationship goals than Paul and Linda McCartney. Hands down, I will fight somebody on this. Even the photographs they take of each other, where it's just one in the other, but the other one's behind the lens, you can feel the wholesome vibes. It's just so inspiring and refreshing, and I love their story. I mean, it was super sweet. For one, I mean, it shows that Paul wasn't a, super judgmental character, because he, fell in love and married a single mom in the 60s when, I mean, he's Paul frickin' McCartney. He could have literally anybody he wanted, pretty much. I mean, he's a Beatle. excuse me. So, like, here he is, he has his pick, and he's like, no, I love this woman. Doesn't bother me that she's got a kid by somebody else. We're gonna make this work. In fact, it's cute because, the first time he met her, he just sort of, like, blocked her. She was headed somewhere, about to leave the bar or wherever they were at, and sort of stood up and blocked her way. It was like, "Hi, I'm Paul," and we're going over to whatever club, and you should come with us. It's just totally out of the blue, and it would be supremely awkward if it was anybody but, a literally world famous musician doing this. And so she went over, and they saw Procol Harum, and then they didn't see each other for about a year. And then I think when the Beatles came to America, they reconnected because I believe she was photographing, you know, their whatever event they were at. And after that, they started seeing each other regularly. And Linda moved to Britain, with her daughter. And oh my goodness, just look up the pictures that like Linda took on their farm together, where it's like Paul and her daughter and then their kids when they had them together, and the big fluffy sheepdog Martha. Just like the most wholesome pictures ever. Hence why they are totally the gold standard of relationship goals in musical couples. And it's just precious. Now to get to the rock and roll part, because like I said, all these couples are made of musicians, who married other musicians. Except for Linda was not a musician when she married Paul. She married Paul in like 1969, but in like 1971 they did the beloved Ram album together, and then after that, she was in Paul's band Wings. So he sort of brought the musician out of her. She had just been a photographer taking pictures of lots and lots of musicians. There's pictures she took of Hendrix and Jackson Browne and I think Pink Floyd, The Animals, The Stones, a whole bunch of other artists, before she even met Paul. Also, side note here, when they were recording Abbey Road, Linda was trying to stay back and out of the way, unlike a different Beatleian spouse. Not throwing shade at Yoko Ono whatsoever. Sorry, had to get that in there. But no, Linda was trying to, support Paul, not run his life, which is, wholesome and encouraging. And so yeah, like I said, they, had the Ram album, and then they had Wings, but it was long before she even met Paul McCartney that Linda was inspiring some silly love songs, as in her father, who was like a show business lawyer, asked a friend of his named Jack Lawrence to write a song using the name Linda, because little Linda Eastman, future Linda McCartney, was about 4 years old at the time. And I don't know, maybe there wasn't a song using the feminine name Linda yet. I don't know a lot of songs that have the name Linda in them, other than the one that Jack Lawrence wrote, and then like Linda Let Me Be the One by not by Paul McCartney, by Bruce Springsteen, and a couple other Linda songs. Linda doesn't get used a lot. So anyways, her dad asked his friend Jack Lawrence to write a song using Linda, which he wrote, and then Buddy Clark took to #1 in 1947, and 15 years later, surf group Jan and Dean would cover it on their Jan and Dean Take Linda Surfin' album. So, silly little love songs from when she was a very little girl and onward. She inspired them all and inspired Paul. And one of the saddest things I have ever read was someone conjectured. They were like, I wonder if Paul McCartney listens to silly little love songs just to hear Linda say I love you again. And I was like, thanks. I didn't need a heart today. I'm not crying, you're crying. It's raining on my face. Yeah, no, not okay, random internet commenter. I didn't need those kind of emotions. But because Linda died in 1998 from breast cancer, I remember this very vividly because I was living in Tucson, Arizona at the time, and I was like 6 or 7, and so I knew who the Beatles were, and I was always secretly hoping we'd like run into Paul McCartney at, the grocery store in Tucson, because he totally did his own grocery shopping. Probably not, but as an 8-year-old, you don't really understand these things, or rather 6 or 7-year-old, so you really don't understand these things. And so I remember hearing it all over the local news about how Linda McCartney had died, because they were local-ish, as local as you can be in a town as big as Tucson. So that had a big impact on me as a kid. And then like 3 years later, George Harrison died, and they had a whole day-long feature on MTV about George and the Beatles the day after my birthday. So weirdly have these run-ins with the Beatles and death in my childhood. But moving on from death to much happier topics, well, those were like the big four that I intended to focus on. I do have some honorable mentions of rock and roll romances, which would be, dun, 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 first off, Patti Smith, the punk poet, and her husband, Fred Sonic Smith, who was of the massively influential band, the MC5. And they stayed together until Fred's very untimely death. I can't remember for sure. I think it was of a heart attack. He was only like in his 40s, I think. But they did have 2 kids together. And I mean, it's not that Patti Smith is like my favorite musician, but I do love like her individuality and just, her being herself and not taking anything, being an authentic individual. And also, she has ultimate respect for being the last artist to play at the CBGBs before they closed it down, much to the grief of all punks. So, Patti and Fred were another musical power couple, sadly, with one of them now passed. But, staying on happy topics, the next 2 are totally both still alive and well. And that would be Elvis Costello, who definitely felt some attractions to his beautiful jazzy wife, Diana Krall. They met at the Grammys, so that's a fairly auspicious musical beginning to a romance. And then, on top of that, they had a totally fairy tale and rock and roll wedding by getting married at Elton John's castle. Just casual like that. And they have a set of twins together, and have also done a musical collaboration. Her the Glam Rag Doll album has Elvis on it, and she complimented how, there's no real power struggle in their marriage at all, so there wouldn't be when they go in to record, and so they're able to musically collaborate well, which is really sweet. And the other one is the band that I really need to do a episode on one of these days, Blackmore's Night, which is named for Ritchie Blackmore of Deep Purple and Rainbow, and his wife Candice Knight. And their band that they made together is just awesome. Like, I love the weird niche genre of like medieval folk rock that they do. I love a lot of songs by them. Her voice is unearthly and amazing, and I love it. And I love that they have been together for as long as they have been, because while they didn't get married until 2008, they've been together over 30 years. It's like 32 or 33 years of, consistently being together. And they've got at least one kid. I think they have a couple, but I know that they have a daughter named Autumn because they named their album Autumn Sky after her. And it has some really sweet songs on it. So like Ritchie and Candice are also a rock and roll power couple, even though she doesn't play strictly rock, and their band definitely isn't strictly rock. Like I said, it's a sort of weird blend, like medieval folk rock, like think Trans-Siberian Orchestra, but less orchestra and less metal influence, which seems strange coming from an artist like Richie Blackmore. Like I said, I'm going to have to do an episode on Blackmore's Night at some point because it is an amazing group and I love their stuff so much. That aside, that sort of concludes the highlighted couples of rock and roll. Like I said, we've discussed Johnny and June, Bruce and Patty, Pat and Neil, Paul and Linda, and then the honorable mentions at the end of Patty and Fred, Elvis and Diana, and Candace Knight and Richie Blackmore in their lovely band Blackmore's Night. So hopefully that encourages you, whether it encourages you in your existent relationship to, that love is worth fighting for, or encourages you, if you're like me, that it's actually real, that love is real, to quote Bruce Springsteen, who definitely found out that it was when he found Patty. So here's to all the lovebirds or birds looking for their lovebird on this fine Valentine's Day, and hopefully y'all get loads of chocolate and stuffed bears and all the good stuff, and, stay well, mentally and otherwise. And I will be back next week with another episode. In the meantime, just be kind to each other. Be extra kind to some people right now, because it's... Okay, I'm gonna be totally real. It's not an easy time of year for anybody, due to seasonal depression. And it's really not an easy time of year this particular time of the month for some of us who are perennially single. So maybe give your, forever alone friends an extra hug, or if they're not hugging people, just get them a something to remind them that you're thinking of them. Because we need love too, dang it. No, no self-pity here, but just an awareness PSA to look out for those around you. It's the punk thing to do. It's what Joe Strummer would do. And you do you, and y'all have a great and healthy and prosperous week. And like I said, be kind to each other and rock on. And I will see y'all next week.